NASA is one of the top attractions in Houston, Texas, and always shows up as one of the best things to do.
After being here for a good 2 years, Clara and I have finally decided to check it out to see what the hype is about, and to decide for ourselves whether it is indeed the top thing to do in town.
If you're curious about NASA too, then I hope you'll be hanging out with us for the day. One thing we noticed was that the closer we got to the space station, the more space-themed everything started to get. The street names were named things like Saturn Way and NASA Parkway. There were statues of aircrafts and even an astronaut at McDonald's. Parking was pretty simple. It was $10 for the day and you pay for it through the QR code. We just arrived at NASA Space Center.
About to head in and see what the fuss is all about. What's so great about this stuff?
Oh yeah, let's head in.
There was a line to check in and get into the building, but it was pretty quick and easy. Once we made it inside, the lights were dim and we were in this big circular area surrounded by tons of things to see and do, like these VR games to the right, an information center in the middle, hanging space machines, and exhibits everywhere. That being said, we had no idea what to do or which direction to go first. But I remembered from a few other videos I'd seen that the tram tours were typically done first. So that's what we decided to do too.
We walked over to the tram tour area to see what we could sign up for, and there were 2 free tours, the Rocket Park tour and the Training Facilities tour. To do the Training Facilities tour, you need to sign up for it at Guest Services, which was near the entrance. So we walked over, got what we think were the last tickets for the day, which means if you want to do this one, remember to sign up early, and then headed back over to get in line for the Rocket Park tour.
Alright, just boarded the tram, getting ready to do the tour. We only needed to wait about 5 minutes for the tram to come, and to our surprise, we passed by some longhorns along the way. After about 2 more minutes of riding on the tram, we arrived at Rocket Park, and they dropped us off to explore. Sadly though, the tram operator did say that we weren't allowed to walk across the street to look at the longhorns because the land was private property. Luckily though, I did have my telephoto lens with me, so I got a few shots of them from a distance. At Rocket Park, there were 2 rockets on display outside, and while we were on the tram, I have to admit that they didn't look that big. Once we got in front of them though, they were huge. There was also some moss or mold growing on the side of them too, which added this subtle feeling of time and antiquity to the machines. After spending some time out here, we walked inside the building to see what was in there, and yes, it was a ginormous rocket.
This is Saturn V, one of the most powerful rockets ever built and the first to take the Apollo missions to the moon. When we entered, we were right next to the blasters, and it was crazy to just see how big they were. I already feel tiny, and when I stood next to one blaster, it made me feel tinier. With the total of 5 blasters, well, basically I felt 5 times tinier than the tinier I already felt. As we walked on, we got to see where each section of the rocket began and ended. Each section revealed another set of blasters, lots of wires and pipes, and a metal dome. They also kept getting smaller and smaller, which probably meant that they needed less and less power the further the rocket was from Earth. And when we reached the last section, we learned that that was where the astronauts slept. We're looking at this shipcraft called Saturn V, and it's in this giant warehouse. And I'm thinking, it's not a bad sized warehouse for a workshop.
It's crazy how we humans, and by we, I do refer to myself as far removed from these geniuses, we're able to create and do things like this. Things so far beyond my own comprehension. And I guess this feeling is one of the biggest things that makes a place cool. It's that slap in the face of reality reminding you of how small and insignificant we are, which at the same time reminds you about how special it is that you are here and alive right now. And after taking all of that in, we headed back towards the tram, and it took us back towards the space station. To our surprise though, it didn't take us directly to the space station itself, but rather right next to it, to Independence Plaza. All right, we are now at Independence, Park?
Oh yeah, Independence Park.
Independence Park, and we're going to be taking a look at the space shuttle and the Boeing aircraft here.
In the plaza was a real Boeing 747 that had performed several actual missions, and on top of it was a replica of the space shuttle called Independence. We walked all the way up to the top of the stairs, which was a bit of a struggle because Don had just finished his leg day at the gym. And the first exhibit was literally the top portion of the shuttle, featuring piloting controls and an overlook to the rest of it. When we walked down a level, we got to take a look at their locker room area and the rest of the shuttle's body.
The next level below the shuttle starts the tour of the Boeing 747. In here, we learned that the reason this combination of airplane and space shuttle exists in the first place is because they wanted to make space exploration cheaper and reusable. And as we walked through the plane, we got to see lots of interactive exhibits that talk about the challenges they faced designing this system, as well as how they overcame them. The kids seemed to be really into the interactive ones, and we thought they were pretty cool too.
After touring Independence Plaza, we headed back inside the NASA building and into the exhibit called Skylab, America's first space station. This section gave us an immersive look at the overall space station experience with lots of artifacts on display and some really cool models of astronauts in action. All of this made me wonder how it feels to do everyday things without gravity, like taking a shower or just moving from point A to point B. Also, after so much time in space, how would it feel to be back on Earth again? Do they miss the zero-gravity life, or are they happy to dig their feet in the sand? Whichever it is, space life looks exciting and for some reason, makes me want to go to a Ninja Warrior gym.
The next area was the Starship Gallery, and in here they showed a variety of achievements from space exploration as a whole. All of the exhibits had something interesting to note, but my favorite was probably the diorama of the moon landing. Since I'm a bit of a camera geek, seeing the big old cameras they strapped onto themselves was pretty cool to see and reflect on. Nowadays we're spoiled with tiny cameras like the GoPro and even our phones, which makes me wonder, do you think GoPros would work on the moon? The most interesting aspect of the diorama though was how there were no stars in the sky, and that's because the astronauts didn't see any. On one of the info charts, it explained that they planned for the astronauts to land on the moon during its lunar day. And just like how we can't see any stars during the day on Earth, the same thing happens during the moon's daytime. And with the moon rotating much slower than Earth, its days and nights are significantly longer at almost 15 of our Earth days.
Next, we stopped by the Lunar Samples Vault. They had moon rocks on display and it was really cool to see how detailed they were with the models too. It kind of made you feel like you were in the lab where they were doing the experiments and tests. In the middle of the room, there was also a little moon rock for people to touch. To me, it kind of just felt like any other rock I felt, but I guess it's still cool to say that I've technically touched the moon.
After the lunar samples, we kind of breezed and wandered our way through the next few areas. We stopped by the Destiny Theater, which talked about the James Webb Telescope, the Artemis exhibit to see how they're preparing for the next moon mission, the Mission Mars exhibit for a glimpse of Martian exploration, as well as the gift shop, the game area, and the food court. Our last stop for the day, though, was the tram tour of the Astronaut Training Facility.
Last tour of the day, Astronaut Training Center. On our way there, we saw some deer walking around. Turns out the Space Center also doubles as a wildlife refuge, and there are maybe about 150 deer in the area. When we arrived at the training facility, we both thought we were gonna see astronauts running on treadmills and jumping around in zero gravity or something. But what this exhibit actually was the chance to see and observe the variety of complex machinery they made to mimic the conditions in space. It was fun to see their messy desks, and the fact that I noticed an Amazon box reminded me that astronauts, despite the amazing and courageous things they're doing, are just people like me and you. And with that concludes the exhibit and our entire trip here.
So let's circle back to the very beginning and answer the question we had coming here. is the Space Center really one of the best attractions in Houston? In my opinion, the major bonuses of the day were the models they set up to paint a picture of how things were like in space and the wildlife on the tram rides. But the most impressive thing for me was being able to walk around and see Saturn V. The amount of respect and appreciation that I felt for the entire NASA team, our country, and our entire human species was unexpectedly astronomical, pun intended. And I couldn't help but feel that it was a very similar feeling to what I get when I stand before a giant waterfall or a natural marvel.
I agree with that, and additionally, I really enjoyed being able to see and walk inside the space shuttle too. Artifacts like this are things we can easily see through pictures and videos, but how often do you get to experience them with your own eyes and immerse yourself? I will have to say that I did wish there were more things to see, but realistically, I think the more I'm looking for at this point is basically being able to experience the space itself. So, NASA, if you need another astronaut, let me know. In my opinion, saying that NASA is the best attraction in Houston might be a little too strong to say, but it is fun, is very interesting, and is a place that I feel is worth checking out.
You know what? I'm gonna have to agree with that too.
I hope you all enjoyed this video.
And we'll see you in our next adventure.
Woo!